Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Christian. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So we have a lot of really good stuff to talk about, but before we dive into it, Christian, maybe you could take a second and just give us a little bit about your background and passions in marketing. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am director of product marketing in a company called FOSSA, focused on open source developers. And my experience initially came from business side. So I worked at a big energy company. I worked in the energy industry for a little over a decade. When I was in the energy industry, kind of formed a lot of internal products and internal groups around data science and helping use our data more efficiently. So ultimately, that resulted in me moving to the tech space. So a perfect fit for me was to land in an early stage startup doing product marketing, which is kind of like at this intersection of business strategy. And if you're in the tech industry like I am, being a little bit, tech savvy and interested in that stuff, and helping to basically translate that technology to an audience and tell them why they should care. So that translation is a good fit for myself as well as for other generalists. If you're out there and you're wondering, hey, how do I use this set of skills where I'm kind of technical but not an engineer and I like to tell stories, product marketing is a good fit. So I made that transition and never looked back. I have worked at 3 different startups. Each one I've basically built the product marketing function. And so that's something really exciting where you get to kind of define how it's done. And then also as the company grows, you kind of have to change to meet the needs of the company. So it's been really exciting. My passion in that space is really towards kind of technical audiences, so data scientists and developers, and being able to tell an exciting story to those audiences. One of the reasons I love it is because they will keep you honest. You have to be direct about what the thing is and why it matters, and ruthlessly cut out every marketing buzzword. And I really resonate with that. So that's why I like working with those audiences myself.
I love it. That's awesome. So today I'm really fascinated because I think this is such an underutilized element for so many people in content marketing, product marketing. But really, it's using your users and customers to discover the kinds of content that you should be producing. So, Christian, when we're looking at that, why does it make sense to talk to customers? Why is that more impactful than maybe the more traditional way of maybe just keyword research and things like that? What are your thoughts in general on why we should be connecting with a customer in the first place before we write content?
Yeah, so for myself, this was born out of necessity, right? You go into a new field or new industry and you're not really sure what to write about. And so inevitably what might happen is you kind of take direction from somebody internally. It might be your CEO or product person, salesperson maybe. They might have a really good connection to the customer, but they might also not. They might have an agenda or an initiative that they're really trying to push that it might not resonate with the customers. And so how do you kind of really answer that question of what should I write about? What does my audience care about? What's going to resonate? What's going to be helpful for them? And so there's really no better source than the customers themselves. And the ultimate goal in this is can I use my customers' words? Can I just steal the words right out of their mouth, including what questions they're asking and the way that they talk about their space? And sometimes that results in you just finding hey, this is a cool blog post I should write. And sometimes it's hey, there's a whole story here that we should be educating the market on. We're in the perfect position to do it. And we haven't yet. So let's do a series on it, or let's do some videos on it. They can give you a lot of certainty and confidence in what you're putting out, at least at first. And then of course you can test and iterate from there. But ultimately, you're trying to avoid what happens, which is okay, I wrote 6 blogs this quarter and they were all kind of internal ideas. And I have no way to know whether they were successful or not. They're all kind of getting the same level of views. Am I writing the right thing or not? That's another great input to that decision framework of what we should be focusing on and what will resonate with folks.
I love that. That's super cool. And you use those 2 different things. You kind of skimmed over them. You can use their questions and you can use their terminology. When you're trying to gather this information, what tools are you using? How do you reach out? How are you finding the customers? I guess, how are you sourcing these conversations? Because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's not easy to get access to your users and clients. What do you typically recommend that you do to get that insights and that information?
Yeah, definitely situation dependent, audience and company dependent as far as which, just like with marketing, I guess, which channels are going to resonate best for you to grab people to talk to. I have gone about it a few ways, and I think others will probably have to as well. The quick and dirty way and the shortcut way is a lot of companies nowadays have Gong or they have some sort of sales recording software, right? So that's an easy way to plug in. And where you want to look is first discovery calls typically. The best place is like in the first 5 to 10 minutes before you've really talked about your product at all. If you have some strong salespeople, they're going to be asking good discovery questions. And what you'll hear is you might hear like three things. One is you'll hear their point of view on the market and like where things stand, right? You might hear their top goals or struggles for that quarter. And often you'll also hear like a key question, one or two questions that they really want to get answered as part of talking to your sales team. And often those can be really great guides for narratives. So that's something that you can do even if you don't have like let's say a strong discovery practice across your company today. And we haven't gotten into it yet, but there's like a whole series of books that has kind of led me to my own philosophy on this, starting really in the product development, product management world, and has been translated thankfully over to the marketing world. But it can be difficult to build those practices that are kind of outlined in those books. Very useful and very helpful. But if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have that yet, maybe while you're building out those practices, you can do something really quick and easy, like plug into these discovery calls. Another good one is if you want to, like if you're looking at Gong, you're looking at prospects, right? You might have current customer meetings with your CS team, right? Where you can tag along or you can leverage them to help you get set up with internal champions who we know we have good relationships with. And that's great. That's another subset of people that's your current customers. There's a whole third subset, which is like people you're not talking to and maybe don't know who the heck you are. And that's just like the audience out there. And I'll kind of recommend, this is, I'm not a paid sponsor, but this is a plug for a service that I like to use for this called Winter with a Y. And they will allow you to really quickly, like within a couple of days, turn around things like message tests or surveys for like a targeted, really good for B2B, a targeted B2B segment like data scientists. And you can kind of really figure out what things they're struggling with and how they think about the problem and stuff like that. So those three together can be inputs to you to like, all right, let me figure out what I need to talk about by triangulating from those three sources. But ultimately, the golden goose or the holy grail is to get face-to-face with these folks. So again, going back to the CS team, for current customers, that's your most expedient bet. Who do we have good relationships with? We know maybe a few people internally. There's somebody that may be passionate that will talk to us without very much nudging and is real opinionated. Those are great places to start. Number one, because they'll say yes, but number two, because it builds your own habit of interviewing. And that's a whole nother level, is like, what kind of questions do you ask? There's a very specific way to go about it to get the types of insights that are going to be useful to you. And we can talk more about that later if we get to it.
I love it. And you answered one of my future questions about the scalability. I mean, you talked about how do we start out and using the Gong and sales recordings and then the one-off going to your CS team and then the winters and things like that. So that's super impactful. I love how you've thought through that process, not only at the beginning, how to get started, but how does this scale? How does this ramp? How do we continue to utilize this? So you mentioned some of these books and this framework and methodology and how you kind of done it. What are some resources that you recommend that people look at? How do you think about it? What has been an influence for you as you've kind of figured out your philosophy for this whole methodology of content discovery and content creation?
Yeah, so probably influenced by my background, right? So I came, as I mentioned, I was developing some internal products, internal data products for a company that was not a tech company, it was an energy company. And so eventually, leveraged that to go into the tech space. But coming from that product-minded beginning, right, as my roots, I was really interested in like, how do you build good products? So the first challenge that I had to overcome was one of my early companies I joined, we had fallen into a trap that I think a lot of companies fall into, which is they have this idea, they go build an MVP, like heads down for 6 months, and then they come up, and they may even have done some upfront customer research, but then they go heads down, they build the thing, they go 6 months maybe in the wrong direction, bring it out to the customers, and nobody cares, right? And this happens like on some level with our marketing, with our content too, but hopefully on a smaller time scale. But the idea is like, hey, we wasted a lot of time and money. Is there some way we could have triangulated as we are in flight? And I love the analogy of like, if you think about a plane is usually off course like 90% of the time. you always have to redirect as you're in flight. And one small deviation that's uncorrected will result in you being in the wrong city at the end of your route.
Yep.
So I was trying to solve for that originally, and I came across the book. It was well timed. That was right around the time that Teresa Torres published her book, Continuous Discovery. This book is very much targeted towards product management teams, and it's about like, how do I do this on a continuous basis? And the goal that she sets, if you want a heuristic, the goal that she sets is like once a week is the goal. You should be talking to a customer once a week in a discovery interview. So it's not a sales call. It's something totally different, where you're really understanding their world so that you can populate new opportunities for you to go solve that move some sort of product outcome that lead to revenue for your company, instead of just saying, hey, I want more revenue or something, right? And so when you root yourself in the customer problems, and then you say, hey, there's like 6 ways we can solve this. Now we can pick the best solution instead of just saying, I have an idea and having to make a binary decision of yes or no. So that's all product based. But I was, and I still am, a product marketer. Although I'm product leaning, marketing is also in the title. So it's like, I always had this thought, how do I bring these concepts over to the marketing world where we have some of the same problems of I need to discover what topics I'm supposed to be talking about and how I should engage with my customers, what things I should say that will resonate with them. And thankfully, I was trying to do it on my own, but thankfully somebody came along and did it much better with the book, Forget the Funnel. And they actually cite the continuous discovery habits as part of their inspiration for writing that book. So it really resonated with me. And the whole idea of Forget the Funnel is around this idea of customer-led marketing. And I like to think about it as continuous discovery for the marketing team. And so they will lay out this idea of like, how do you go from zero to ultimately a very informed customer experience map that you can leverage for your marketing campaigns, for your content creation, and for a lot of other sources, for customer success teams and others. But we're primarily, interested here in I'm primarily interested in marketing campaigns and content narratives that you can drive. And so those 2 books probably make up, I'd say 80 to 90% of my philosophy and how you do this and why and what you can kind of get out of it. And they're very closely related. But if you're a marketer first, not a product person first, you can probably get what you need out of Forget the Funnel primarily.
Those are great resources. I'm not going to lie. I am excited to read both of those. And before the podcast, when we were emailing back and forth, I went on ChatGPT and had it summarize the books. And I'm like, okay, cool. For sure, something I need to read and something I need to dive into. And usually if you get the summary and then you're excited, that's a good thing. That's a good insight instead of saying, all right, I'm good. I got the Cliff Notes version and I'm all set.
Right. Yeah. It's, most, what's the saying? Like most books could probably just be blog posts.
Yep.
So there's a lot of fluff in a lot of books, but these 2, they're not that way. They're pretty much all actionable, not too thick. And so reading the whole book is worth it.
I love it. One final question, because we're running out of time, is incentivizing customers. I think it's a question that many people will have is, do you incentivize these customers in these conversations or do you not? Do you avoid that? What's kind of your typical thought process when it comes to having these interactions and conversations with people and how to motivate them to be excited to talk to you?
You can incentivize, and I know people have taken that approach, and it's on one hand, you can almost think of it as like it's ethical to incentivize them for their time, right? That's another argument for it. I think if you are incentivizing to get them to be excited to talk to you or interested in talking to you, the end result might not be that great. And also, if you're a B2B company, the $50 that you're going to offer probably doesn't maybe mean too much, especially if you're talking to senior folks. It's nice to incentivize folks, but you should be reaching out to folks who are going to be interested in talking to you anyway. So like when I talk to people and I engage with people, they may be offering me money or something like this, but I would probably talk to them if they didn't offer me money because I was interested in the topic or interested in the person or in the company brand, right? So I'll just share a quick anecdote. Like one of the best ways that I was able to get a lot of organic people to raise their hand and say they wanted to talk to me, I was in a situation working at the company Anaconda where we had really good brand awareness amongst data scientists who are our audience, right? We had this big launch with Microsoft when we put Python in Excel. And right after that, everybody was, crazy about us. We were hot and we had a lot of eyeballs on us. And I took that opportunity to say, hey, we're going to build some other cool stuff in the future. Who wants to talk to us? And like hundreds of people raised their hand. Not everybody will be in that same situation, but you don't need hundreds. You really just need like 6. That'll get you for the next month and a half or 2 months, right? And then you get another 6. And so I'll just say, find where you do have affinity, right? Where people are like smiling at you and then like what you're talking about. And especially if you have hot moments that you can leverage, don't just try to get a new one every week. Try to get yourself set up to where these things are automatic, right? So when I had 130 people raise their hand or whatever it was, I went to all of them and gave them a Calendly link and scheduled things out for months. You got to strike while the iron's hot. And if you can do that, you find those people in those moments who are already kind of passionate and fired up about the problem you're solving. It doesn't even have to be about your product or brand, just that space and the problem you're solving. That's typically the best way to get people to opt in. I tend to think about remuneration or incentivizing as just icing on the cake. Hey, you're going to give me an hour of your time. I'll send you a $50 Amazon gift card. But it's not going to be the thing that gets them excited to talk about what I want to talk to them about.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I love that. The conversations that happen organically where people are just passionate. Sometimes in my career, I've had it where I said, hey, I just want you to vent. Like, all I really want you to do is just tell me everything you hate about your job. And it's like, oh, that sounds like an interesting conversation no one's offered before. Like, I'm intrigued. It's like, okay, what do you hate about this and that and this? And it leads to really good insights. And there's a lot of interesting things. So I think the way that you can kind of frame the conversation can get people excited. And that makes a lot of sense.
That's exactly right. We all need therapy. And sometimes it's just business therapy or job therapy. And venting is a great way to do it. That's a great point.
Yeah, an unbiased third party. Yeah, that's for sure. Awesome. Well, Christian, thank you so much for your time. Great insights. Has really got me thinking about how I can use our users and customers to really develop content that they're actually looking for, where it hits the mark. And obviously, like you said, just how close it can impact the rest of the business, from the product, the roadmap, and everything else that you mentioned. If anyone wants to continue the conversation and connect with you, how can they reach out and connect with you online?
Yeah, the best place to reach me is LinkedIn. I'm on it probably way too much. If you just search for Christian Capdeville on LinkedIn, I talk about primarily data science, open source software, product, organizational influence. That's where my interest lies, and it's what I usually post about. So feel free to reach out to me right there. I am always up for good conversation with folks who are like-minded and interested in solving some of these same problems.
Love it. Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.